Welcome to Road to Recovery.
Hello and welcome to Road to Recovery, advocacy and insights for trucking accidents with Sagi Shaked. Sagi is founder of Shaked Law Personal Injury Lawyers and is ranked as one of the top 100 trial lawyers in the United States by the American Trial Lawyers Association. He has a wealth of experience in personal injury, wrongful death, and complex litigation cases. He's recovered multi-million-dollar settlements and damages for his clients. My name is Kevin Rosenquist. Today we're going to talk about trucking accidents that involve school buses or children. Sagi, great to have you here. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Kevin.
So, all right, we're talking about a tough subject here, but tell me about what are the special laws that apply when a trucking accident involves a school bus or a school zone?
So obviously we know that in school zones, you're supposed to protect children, and that's what those laws are all about. So you have federal laws and state laws. So state laws, we all know this because anyone who's driven in any type of school zone, there's the speed limit, right? You shouldn't go above 15 miles an hour in a school zone, especially when kids are on the way to school or being let go from school. So that's one set of laws. The other couple set of laws are the stop arm laws. And when I say stop arm, it means usually you have a school bus and you see the school bus put that arm down, right? You're supposed to stop on both sides of the roadway. A lot of times you see people continuing to go, and that causes major problems because kids don't know. You have sometimes, 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, or, younger sometimes and a little bit older, and they're anticipating that cars are going to do the right thing and stop. So those laws are in place to help, again, protect children. So hopefully people follow those laws. Now, we talked in the past about trucks. If there's a truck in a school zone, then the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration regulations are going to apply. And those regulations say you have to use extreme caution when you're driving and there's children in the area. So a school zone would be an area where there would be children. And then when you're in a school zone, the fines are always doubled or tripled. And in some cases, in automatic violations. You don't want to do that. And one, it's not good for kids. So if you see these situations, there's laws that are there to protect the kids. So look out for those types of laws in any state. They're almost always the same.
Yeah, it always kind of annoys me when, I have a 4-year-old. It always annoys me when I'm dropping my kid off at school and I see someone flying through the school zone or something like that. I'm like, it's not smart. It's just not smart.
Yeah, not at all, because they can't see themselves.
Right.
What if it was their kid,
Yeah,
So hopefully
totally.
people don't do that, but there's no such thing as, we said it before, I think, common sense. We have common understandings that we should all do things right way, but we don't. That's why we
Right.
have these laws in place, and hopefully people follow them.
Yeah. Yeah. So when it comes to an accident where a child is injured or killed by a truck, in a school zone, who's held liable? How does that work? Like if there's, if they're speeding, if they're not speeding, what are the details there?
Yeah, so we're looking at a couple of different things. If a child is injured or, wrongfully killed in a school zone, we're looking, one, at the truck driver, the trucking company, the broker. It could be a shipper involved. So those are the general ones we're looking at. But you also look at, was there a school bus issue there or a school bus driver? Is the municipality somehow at fault? Is there an engineering company that designed the area? Like, for example, sometimes they have kids dropped off on one side of the street and then they have to cross a major roadway. Why are you dropping the kids off on that side of the street? You should drop them off on the side where they don't have to cross the roadway, even if it requires a little bit more driving on the part of the school bus driver. So sometimes the planning stage on when they're planning the school zone and the drop off areas, they have to be taken into consideration. So think about that as well. It's not just the drivers on the roadway. Sometimes the drivers don't have a choice. They're driving, and it's the school bus driver who dropped off the children in the wrong area, and the way it was designed is wrong. So those are potential avenues to consider.
What do you see as the most common situations where an accident, is involving a truck and a child or children?
So you just mentioned one earlier. You see people passing in a school zone. They're little kids. You can't see them. So
Yeah, totally.
that happens sometimes. or wide turns. People taking extremely wide turns near crosswalks where children are walking. Trucks sometimes fail to stop in the school zone, or when do you see trucks? You usually don't see trucks in school zone, but sometimes there's loading. They're coming in delivering food for the cafeteria or supplies or whatever, and they're not paying attention to the children, or the children shouldn't be there. So that's on the part of the school. So you have that. Sometimes you see them backing up and there's still children there. That's a bad thing. You shouldn't back up a truck, especially near kids. And then you have people speeding. You mentioned it earlier in school zones or residential areas. You shouldn't be doing that. That's why the laws are doubled and sometimes tripled. And again, remember, when you're using a truck, there's blind spots. When you're changing lanes in a school zone, which you shouldn't do in a truck, or you're backing up, there's blind spots all over the place. So those are the types of accidents that we generally see in a school zone.
With trials, juries are going to be, I feel like you just can't help it. When kids are involved, it just changes things a little bit in all of our minds. Is that a situation where insurance companies, trucking companies, whatnot, are more inclined to settle because of that, in your opinion?
They're definitely more inclined to look at cases differently and settle them when you're dealing with a child, because no one wants to see a child get hurt. And if your actions, you see that person speeding, you were pissed, right? When you see them speeding in your school, in your kid's school.
Sure.
I mean, imagine sitting on a jury, you're going to be pissed, and people are going to hold just a natural tendency to do it. You want to hold someone to a higher standard of care when you're in that school zone, because you really need to be on alert. People are using their phones when they shouldn't be. They're speeding, they're passing. I know they're in a rush to work or wherever they're at, but there's children out there. And so the insurance companies know that jurors are going to take it out on them, because nobody wants to see a kid being hurt, especially by someone's reckless conduct.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Do the courts view the cases differently compared to standard accidents, or do they treat them the same way?
They're treated the same, but sometimes you can get a higher level of care or duty that's required upon a trucking company when they're entering the school zone, because you're supposed to exercise, according to those regulations, extreme caution. And that, the judge would have to read that to the jury, that they fail to exercise, or if you find that they fail to exercise extreme caution. Can you imagine a big truck merging lanes in a school zone? Where's the caution there? We're speeding. Those are things that are big no-nos, and hopefully it doesn't happen, but we all know stuff like that does happen. So yeah, I would say there's a different level of scrutiny on the part of the insurance company and then the courts a little bit, but they'll still treat the case the same, but they'll look at it in a more, I don't know if it's an understand. I would call it more of a upset. Like, what are you doing? This could be someone's kid, someone's grandkid,
Yeah.
someone's brother, sister, child.
It's just different, right? It's just something,
Yeah.
even if you don't have kids, I feel like it's just different when you see a child involved in something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Every one of these kid cases is so sad.
I bet. I can't even imagine. Yeah, I mean, the emotional aspect as well as the legal aspect. I mean, how is you as the lawyer, how do you manage all of that? How do you manage the legal aspect of things, keeping the case moving, helping these families while they're grieving as hard as anybody could grieve?
Yeah, that's the hard part, because I take every one of these cases seriously, and I always, the insurance companies are always pissed at me. Why are you asking for so much money? I go, what if it was your kid? What if it happened to your kid? Well, it didn't happen to my kid. Well, what if it did happen to your kid? You would want all the money in the world, and there wouldn't be enough money in the world to compensate for what happened to the child. So I treat it as if they're all my kids, and I want to get the maximum compensation for what happened to them, because it should never have happened.
It's cool, but it's a heavy burden for you.
It is. It is. It's sleepless nights, and you take on a larger responsibility. But I think that's par for the course. If you're a lawyer and you're representing injured victims, especially children, you really have to look at a lifespan of injury. You're talking about, I have a case right now we were doing today with an 11-year-old that was in a head-on collision. It wasn't his fault. He was a passenger, and suffered lacerated spleen, lacerated liver, post-traumatic stress disorder. And so you've got a lifetime worth of justice that they have to take on, because it's a forever injury. It's scarred in that young child's mind. So, do we take the easy money, or do we go out there and get the child full justice for what happened? It shouldn't have
Mhm.
happened, but it did happen, and now they got to get 70 more years of life, um, probably a little bit more than 70, 70 plus. They deserve justice because they're going to deal with that the rest of their life.
Is there any specific evidence that is more important in a case involving a school zone or a school bus that differs from what you would normally look for?
Yeah, I mean, the footage, I think, is always the key. So a lot of school buses now have dash cams on them, interior and exterior. So you always want to get that, especially if you have, an arm case where the arm goes down and the school bus can show what the car did in terms of passing when they shouldn't have passed. You have the black box data. We spoke about that in the past. And then the school zone signs, those are important. Getting pictures of the signs to show, hey, look at all these warnings before you're coming into the school zone, yet you're not doing what you're supposed to do as a driver. And then if it's a truck, you want to get the GPS data, the telematics, the driver logs, everything we spoke about in that preservation letter that we send out. If anyone needs it, I'll send them a copy of my preservation letter. But those are important things that you should look into when you have one of these cases in a school zone. Don't treat it like a regular case. Um, these cases have value, and you really have to get justice for your clients.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, and you mentioned that the insurance companies sometimes give you grief about the amount you're seeking. Are punitive damages generally higher when cases involve children?
Absolutely, yeah. But punitive damages will always work on the conduct of the defendant, meaning the conduct of the wrongdoer. So if the wrongdoer's conduct is so egregious and so bad that the jury's going to take it out on them, and they don't like it. For example, if you're driving drunk and you hurt someone or you kill someone, that is a big no-no. People don't like that, and the juries slam people when they drive drunk or drive high on a drug, you know, on narcotic. Don't do it. Or if they're going over a certain speed limit, there's no reason anyone should be going over 70, 75. Some people are going 100 miles an hour. Yeah, you can just imagine what happens. Nothing good is coming out of that.
Yeah, no doubt about that. You mentioned the PTSD that kids can have in addition to physical injuries. Are there legal protections that exist to kind of shield them from being kind of re-traumatized during litigation, during the proceedings? I mean, that's got to be a tough thing for them.
Yeah, and you would hope that the defense attorneys who handle these cases would be more sensitive when they're taking a deposition of a child. Like, for instance, if we're going to try the case of a child, and we have a bunch of times, most likely we'll speak to the grief expert if it's a wrongful death case, or the psychologist, and 99.9% of the time, they tell us it's not good for the child to be in the courtroom. And what we'll do is we'll ask the jury, you're not going to hear, you're not going to see the child sitting in the courtroom all day because of the emotional effect that it may have on the child. And their psychologist had told us that it's not a good idea. Does anyone have a problem with the child not appearing live? And I can tell you, in all the cases I've tried, no jury has ever said they want to see the child sit there at the plaintiff's table the whole trial. They
Yeah.
understand that it's very difficult. For example, I tried a case where a young child lost his mom, and that was extremely difficult for the child. And we didn't have him even come to trial. We didn't even have him testify. We just read his transcript. And so it really depends on the case. You want to be sensitive to your client's emotions, and you're not looking to re-traumatize them with what they went through or what they're going through. Again, with a trial, I can handle it because that's what I do for a living. But someone who's actually going through the experience is not something that we want to do.
Yeah, no doubt. And not to mention just, I mean, what kid can sit still for that long too? And then you're also re-traumatizing them. They're uncomfortable. Like, yeah, that's just, yeah, I would be
It's
surprised if
torture for
anybody
the
ever had a
kid.
problem with that.
Yeah, torture for the kid. Why would we do that?
Right. Right.
So we definitely wouldn't want to do that. Not a good idea. very insensitive on the part of any lawyer to do that. And I doubt any judge would require a young child to be there for a personal injury case.
Yeah, for sure. We've discussed evidence collection a lot on the show after an accident, what you should do. Obviously, if your child is hurt or, God forbid, worse, you're not going to be in the right mindset to collect evidence. So, what is the key here as far as parents who may have a child who's seriously injured, as far as like getting to a lawyer like you to preserve evidence, but your mind's not going there necessarily? How do you usually coach people in those situations?
So, yeah, I mean, obviously get to the lawyer right away. But what I would tell them is your job is to take care of your child and make sure your child gets better and do everything possible to do that. Our job is to represent your child and get them justice, but we need your help a little bit. And one of the things we need your help is to collect data. And what data do I mean? As your child is progressing and hopefully getting better, because sometimes they get better in certain situations, not all the time, but if they are getting better, we can show that they are making progress. Take videos, take pictures. We like to do conferences every other week so we can find out what's going on with the child, how they're feeling, how they're doing better, potentially talking to their doctors to see, what areas they can get better at. And we want to be involved in that area to help them get better. While I'm not a grief counselor by any means, I don't want them to think that they're at it alone. They're there. We're here to help. And then, when the end of the case comes, in any child scenario case, and this is probably throughout all the US, when a case settles, it's not like the parents get the money or anything like that. The court has to approve the settlement. There's a guardian ad litem that is usually looking at the files, and the guardian ad litem will then report to the judge and tell the judge, Judge, we believe this is a fair settlement. So the guardian will be another attorney in the personal injury world who will look at the case in its entirety and then fill out a report to the judge. And then there's usually a hearing. The judge will then approve or say, you know what, this case didn't settle for the right amount of money, and then go back there and continue to negotiate. So that's what's done. There's therapist support, and there's other support. Obviously the law firm wants to provide support, but that's kind of what they need to do. And then just keep in mind, when these cases are over, you can always file a motion to seal those records if the family doesn't want anyone knowing about it. One last thing before I go off on a tangent here. What I would say is when we file these children cases, we're generally filing them under like a pseudonym or under initials. So no one can really look up the person's name and ever find out if they were involved in a lawsuit or not.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today on Road to Recovery. If your child was injured in a crash involving a truck or a bus, make sure you reach out to Sagi. Visit shakedlaw.com. Today's episode was helpful. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review. We very much appreciate it. Sagi, always great chatting with you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.